Hi everyone, you're listening to the Earful Tower podcast with Oliver G. That's me, and this show is brought to you by French Today audiobooks, teaching you how to speak French like a French person. More on them at the end of the episode, but guys, this is a different episode for a large number of reasons, and I'm going to whip through a few of them first. First, you might have already heard it, I've got not much of a voice. I've been sick all week, and I'm recording this on Easter Monday. The episode you're about to hear, I recorded just 5 minutes ago, so apologies for my voice in advance. Number two, it's a weird story. I recorded this very similar episode to this with the guest today, Philippe Hertzberg. So last Monday, we were in the studio recording about his tour company, Secret Journeys, and we were talking about the Notre Dame at great length. And that was the same day later that night that it burned down. So we agreed that we wouldn't use the interview that we did, and he came into the studio today and we re-recorded it based on what happened and what's going to happen from his perspective. I figured rather than do a half-hour episode on it, I figured we'd just let the conversation go. We ended up talking for closer to an hour. I think it's really interesting. I think you guys will find things in there you didn't know. You'll certainly learn things and give you a bit of perspective from a man like Philippe, who's half French, half American, and spends a lot of his time in the Notre Dame Cathedral. Indeed, he was out the front of it when it started burning down. So yeah, there are a few reasons why it's a bit of a different episode. But I figured before I switch to the interview with Philippe, I'd give you guys some background, some perspective, some context on how everything with the Notre Dame went down from my own perspective, because I got such an overwhelming number of emails from you listeners that I think it's only fair that I give you some feedback that you asked for. Firstly, thank you so much for all the kind emails and the kind thoughts. Really blew my mind how many people's thoughts went to sending messages to me when such a tragedy was happening. So, let me tell you what happened from my side. Is on Monday, after I'd recorded with Philippe, the episode that no one's ever going to hear, I suppose, I went and played basketball out in the suburbs for 2 hours. And at the end of the basketball game, one of the guys got his mobile phone out and said, "Oh my God, Notre Dame is on fire." And everybody gathered around and realized very quickly how serious it was, because at this point, it was maybe 9:30, and it had been burning for several hours. So the worst of the images were out there. And I could tell straight away that, this was a huge, huge story. And I went straight to my phone where I, over the 2 or 3 hours, it just gathered so many messages from all my family and friends, from the very early ones, people saying, "Oliver, you got to go do something about this," to countless messages from you guys, the listeners, sending thoughts or asking me what's going on, or asking if I was going to do anything. So I got on my scooter and headed down to the Notre Dame, and I pressed live, did a Facebook Live video, quite a reserved one, not the kind of walk show that I usually do, going around trying to be entertaining and pointing things out. This was just showing what was happening, showing the people that were singing. It was very touching. It was very... it was heavy. It was a very heavy moment, especially there was one point in it where I was standing on the Pont de la Tournelle bridge, and just spontaneously people started singing this hymn for like 3 or 4 minutes, and I was just sort of filming them and filming the Notre Dame in flames in the background, and it was a really touching moment. Anyway, so that was that. I intended to maybe go and do another sort of live video showing the damage in the days afterwards, but as you can probably hear from my voice, I got extremely sick, and I wasn't able to interview anybody like I planned to. I wasn't able to do the videos that I planned. I cancelled a bunch of podcast episode recordings that I had. So it's been a crazy... I've been bedridden all week, and I'm still not feeling very well today, but I met with Philippe in the studio, and we had a really good chat about everything, Notre Dame. But what I wanted to reference before you listen to this interview is there's a few things you probably need to know. First, it's a very warm day in Paris. So as we recorded, I had the window open, so you will hear the Easter church bells going off intermittently throughout this episode. You will hear sirens of police or ambulance, I don't know what it is, somewhere in the middle there as well. And you also need to know there are two characters that are referred to a lot. One is Quentin, who is a real-life character. He's the historian that does the... See, there's the bells I was telling you about. Quentin does the tours of the Notre Dame, or at least he did them. And we talk about him a lot. He's been in one of the videos that I've done. I'd encourage you guys all to go and watch it on YouTube after this episode. It's me and Quentin, a historian, walking around the outside of the Notre Dame about 2 months ago. He talks all about all the kind of things that you'll find very interesting if you're intrigued at all by this Notre Dame disaster. But to give you a bit of perspective as well, what disappeared because we filmed it. The spire and the roofs, those kind of things. The other character is a real person as well, but long dead. It's Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. Regular listeners to this show will know, I've talked about him before. He's the guy who rebuilt Carcassonne, where I went on the honeymoon trip. We talk about him a lot, but if you hear Eugène Viollet-le-Duc or just Viollet-le-Duc, we're talking about the architect who was essentially responsible for the rebuilding of large parts of Notre Dame in the 19th century. So they're two names that crop up a lot in case you're wondering what I'm talking about. But here comes Philippe Hertzberg from Secret Journeys. You can book that. We talk all about Notre Dame in this episode, but they do tours, sort of really interesting, in-depth tours of places like Notre Dame, Versailles, that kind of stuff. Check out their website, secretjourneys.travel. And again, check out my YouTube channel. You should subscribe to it and watch the video of me and Quentin walking around Notre Dame, but also the video from when I went inside the Notre Dame when it's closed. It'll also give you a lot of perspective on the cathedral just in general. It'll give you perspective. It'll give you an idea of exactly what's burned down, really, and kind of eerie to look at it, knowing that a lot of it that was on the camera is now gone. Anyway, once again, apologies for the voice. Enjoy this interview with Philippe Hertzberg from Secret Journeys, and remember to hang around at the end from a word from our sponsor, French Today, plus a little bit of emails from listeners at home. Let's take it away. Philippe, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver.
This is one of those rare, in fact, it's so rare, it's never happened before that I've recorded an episode twice in a row for such unusual circumstances. But I think, firstly, it was pretty weird that we recorded this episode last week right before the tragedy. We were talking about Notre Dame. We were talking about all this stuff. That was weird for me. You?
It was weird for me as well. I don't know if you recall, but I on that same evening I had organized a special private visit of Notre Dame for the team of the Basilica of the Sacré-Cœur.
Right.
So I was actually meeting with them, with actually the rector, Monseigneur Laverton, with the spokeswoman, the director of communications of the Basilica of Sacré-Cœur, at 6:30 p.m.
Right.
The spokesperson of Notre Dame was also meeting us, including Quentin, our storyteller. So it was an exceptional visit that we had organized to show the Basilica of Sacré-Cœur what we had created with the team at Notre Dame,
right,
and to walk them through all the different special moments outside and inside the cathedral that many of your listeners have already experienced, and many guests from around the world had experienced, because we were presenting that experience, those moments, since September of last year.
Right, so you were presenting the walk for the Sacré-Cœur people.
Exactly.
On the Monday night that the Notre Dame burned down.
Yeah, and really the purpose was, this is what we were able to co-create with Notre Dame. And these are the stories that we were able to unveil for guests within Notre Dame and with Notre Dame, and why not do the same together?
So if you don't mind, could you walk me through? You were, what time did the fire start? It was
we were.
Walk me through the whole thing.
Well, we were in front of the cathedral. Our meeting point is usually it's on Tuesdays. Exceptionally, this was on Monday, because it was a private visit. We were performing that in French with Quentin, and so we were there at a little bit before 6:30. So at 6:15 we were there. And actually at around 6:20, the first alarm. The alarm started ringing inside the cathedral, so they started evacuating everyone. Obviously, the spokesperson of Notre Dame was then completely inside. He went inside and was there with everyone to check what was happening.
Was it like panic? Were people?
No, it was not panic. I mean, they actually had been. They were performing these exercises before,
Right.
so they were used to it, and so everyone very calmly, everyone was exiting the cathedral, and then it happened to be a false alarm. I mean, that was actually the information that we received so we were starting our journey with the team from the Sacré-Cœur Basilica and Quentin until a few minutes later. That was around 6:40 p.m. A second time, the alarm went off inside the cathedral, and then just a few minutes later, we actually saw smoke
Right.
coming out of the cathedral in between the two towers.
So you were standing in front of in the two big towers at the front. You could see the smoke coming.
We can see the
between
smoke
Yep.
coming through. Actually, the wind was going east-west, and so the wind was pushing some smoke, the first smoke, towards the square of Notre Dame. So we turned around to see where the smoke was coming from, and we saw much more smoke coming out of the spire.
Right.
And that's where we looked at each other in complete dismay, and there were some words that we exchanged about how old the wood, the 1,300 beams that make the forest. That's the name that the beams and the whole structure is given. It's the forest,
Right.
because there are 1,300 trees that are, for most of them, 1,000 years old.
Wow.
They were planted over 1,000 years old, over 1,000 years, and the beams are so dry and it was so windy that it was very sad, because we felt this is going to be difficult to stop.
So you could almost you could see what was happening before it was happening.
You're always you're powerless. You're hopeful. Your heart is racing. You're already heartbroken, because then you see swirls of smoke, yellow smoke, and it was just spinning on top of the cathedral. At that moment, you're still in front of the cathedral, and the police forces start pushing you away, and you're feeling some of the ashes falling on you.
Wow.
Some of this might be toxic because there's lead in the roof.
Of course.
So you're being evacuated, and as you're being evacuated, you sort of witnessing this scene, which is surreal. I think this is a word. It is completely surreal to see Notre Dame burning.
So the police were quick to move you away then.
They were. There were so many people in front of the cathedral,
Yeah.
especially because they were evacuated from inside,
Yeah.
from the last mass. Because that's really the last mass is between 6 and 7 p.m. 7 p.m. is when the cathedral closes, and everyone leaves. So you can imagine everyone was in front, and we were then pushed or evacuated on the other side, on the left bank, and that's where we were witnessing the devastation. I wanted to thank many of your listeners, many of our guests, because I was there with Quentin, and Quentin, as you can imagine, and Quentin Oliver was devastated, as we were all devastated, and I mean, his connection with Notre Dame is even greater than is the greatest that I know of anyone around me, and so
he loves that building. Like, I remember when I went back and watched the walk show that I did with him around the exterior, about 2 months ago, and he was talking about how he dreams about it and how he'd love to live across from it to see it. It's his life, right? So what was how was it with you and him standing there? I mean, by this point, the flames are visible?
The flames are visible, and you are just witnessing horror. And this terrible, sad moment where you know that it's really going to be difficult or impossible to save. And so we're powerless are words, heartbroken. It also, you feel how vulnerable you are. I mean, it is, and in many of the accounts, it is like losing someone, and it makes you think about your vulnerability in front of such devastation.
So what? So if I'm right, you're standing over sort of towards where Shakespeare and Company is. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
And this, we're around 7:00 now. The fire. I wasn't down there at this point, but I've seen videos and I saw that the flames were literally leaping up into the air. What was the feeling of the crowd around you?
Well, the crowd was silent for the most part, and then part of the crowd started singing and chanting, mourning and praying. And I think whether you're religious or not, there's a communion. I mean, at that point, you're with everyone. You're shedding tears. You're trembling. People are shaking their heads. People are covering their eyes. But it's it is a moment that these are images I will never forget. Like I will never forget all the times that I've been inside the cathedral over the past months. And actually, those past months, when I think about them, they're a drop of water in the history of witnessing all those moments inside the cathedral. It's a drop of water in the history of the hundreds of years of Notre Dame. However, what intensity of that drop of water? I would say, what intensity? And I am thankful in the work I've been doing with the cathedral to have been able to have those moments, those special moments inside the cathedral. Each time I was in the cathedral, I was, in a way, pinching myself. This is actually part of my work, and I'm here.
Well, it's so I did your secret journey in Notre Dame about, what would it be, about 2 months ago-ish, I think. We were there together. And I'd been in Notre Dame many times before. And the thing about your experience that I did is it gave me a lot more perspective of what's inside there. Right, because I think a lot of tourists, or even people who live in Paris like me, or just anyone who's been in there, you go in, you're like, oh yeah, beautiful cathedral, stained glass windows, altar. Yeah, that's sort of what's in your head. But when I did your experience, I know you go up to that the organs up on the, I don't know how many floors up you'd say that is, but right up in the
20
sky,
meters high.
20 meters high, this big wooden organ, and then I was thinking the relics of. You have to remind me what they are.
The crown of thorns.
Yeah, the crown of thorns.
Thorns, sorry.
And the
and the tunique of Saint Louis.
That's right.
The robe of Saint Louis.
That's right.
The king who actually brought the crown of thorns to Paris.
Right. So all this stuff, I could have known it was there, but I didn't. But I'd seen it, and so when I was seeing it burn, I was thinking about this stuff, and I got a lot of emails from people who knew that I'd been up there, or who had seen the YouTube video that I'd done, and were using that as this kind of way to see what was in there. And so what was going through my mind was like, oh my God, like I know exactly what's potentially burning in there. What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking, hopefully everything inside, most of it can be saved. And a lot has been written and a lot has been celebrated, and rightly so, for the firemen who really did an amazing job. I mean, initially they were doing the best they could do to sort of save the structure, and so they were watering the structure to cool it off. Even across the Seine, where we were next to Shakespeare and Company, we can feel the heat. I mean, this is how intense the fire was.
Yeah.
You can feel the heat on your face as if you were in front of your fireplace.
Wow.
I mean, that's how intense that was. So at one point they closed that little park and they evacuated everyone because they were afraid it was going to collapse. The building was going to collapse, and that shreds of building would hurt you. So they were just pushing you as far away as possible. But what you're thinking, well, go guys. looking at the firemen,
Yeah.
save as much as you can. I mean, there were nearly 500 firemen watering and trying to get as high as they could. I mean, the tallest ladder I've read was in Versailles. The tallest ladder. So they brought the tallest ladder from Versailles into Paris.
Wow.
To Notre Dame to get as high as they could. Then you start seeing firemen on the towers trying to put as much water on the structure, and then you learn afterwards. Of course, they could not throw chunks of water with planes or helicopters because that would fragilize. I mean, many people were thinking that why aren't they throwing water? And actually, well, of course, you think about it. Yes, if you throw tons of water, it's like a hammer, hammering the structure.
Yeah.
Much more devastation would have happened.
Well, yeah, that's it. It's tons of water. It could be tons of anything, right?
Exactly. So what you're thinking is, hopefully, and you're also thinking, the towers, protect the towers. As
So you're referring to the front two,
the two towers, the
symmetrical
north and south towers. So the the frightening moment, obviously, and the very emotional moment was, I think it was around 8 p.m., just before 8 p.m. when the spire fell. So that was the symbol of the spire is Notre Dame. Although it's the Viollet-le-Duc, it's a rebuilt spire from the 19th century, but it is Notre Dame. It's just so emblematic of Notre Dame. So when you see that spire go down, your heart is transperced by that scene.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, okay, next thing is the towers. So you're really hoping and praying that the towers, and especially at one point, I don't know if you've seen images, but there were some flames in the North Tower. So because the structure that holds the bells is in wood.
Right.
And so flames started in the Northern Tower.
Yeah.
But luckily, the firemen were close enough to put those out. And reports show that it was just a question of 15 minutes. If firemen had come 15 minutes later, that would have been, the two towers would have been hurt.
So let's talk a little bit about the restoration and Viollet-le-Duc and the restoration or the renovation that's I guess it's restoration that's gonna happen going forward. And this fits all in pretty nicely with what you've been doing. I mean, by the way, from your perspective as well, you're standing there watching it burn down. I realize a lot of people would have had different reactions to this from different, someone who's deeply religious or Catholic would feel differently to someone who, an architecture enthusiast, or part of your business is showing people around that place. Was that going through your head as well? Where you're like, oh my God, that's my work there.
I mean, not really. I mean, what's going through, I think, whether it's your work, whether it's for religious reasons, whether you are for so many different reasons, I think you are hurt as much. I mean, I think the pain is as intense. And I think then the pain is different and is expressed differently. And then the aftermath of the pain, obviously, I mean, I'm thinking of all the employees of Notre Dame who they've seen their life, their work, and for many decades of working in that building. Yeah. I'm thinking of Musique Sacrée at Notre Dame de Paris, which is the association that organizes all the concerts all year long. And we were very closely working with their wonderful team. So I'm thinking of many people. I have many faces in mind, and obviously through messages and emails after, I've been in touch with many of them, including telling them how, sharing our thoughts and sharing the thoughts, the very moving thoughts and words of affection that were shared by many. So I saw myself more also as a bridge between the outside and the team that I know very well.
So back before I distracted myself there, the restoration work. So your Secret Journeys tours, which I should add you do beyond just at Notre Dame. this one, particularly at the Notre Dame Cathedral, focused on the restoration and the renovation works of it over the centuries, right? You mentioned Viollet-le-Duc, which is one of my heroes in the history of France, the story of the history of France, because he essentially did up a lot of buildings all over the place. So he did the spire, right? He also did work at Carcassonne, which is, I think, my favorite town in the whole country.
Yeah, he did work also at Vézelay.
Vézelay as well.
Yes, and
Mont Saint-Michel too.
I think Mont Saint-Michel. But I think what's interesting about I mean, to your point, what we try to bring into with Quentin, our storyteller, and
Right.
he's a historian, he's a professional guide, he's got this strong connection with Notre Dame, he's worked in Notre Dame. So he was entrusted with the ability to show us many places, including the big organ balcony. But also we went inside the choir. So there were many places that were, thanks to Quentin, his knowledge and the experience he has, that we were able to enter. But together with Quentin, and this is what we're trying to achieve in every journey we put together, is really getting this a story and the intimacy and how authentic it is through the voice of a narrator, knowledgeable narrator, inspiring narrator, who is going to bring you into and weave the anecdotes and the stories into the main theme. And our main theme, as you recall rightly, is restorations. Because Notre Dame, over 850 years, it's a story of renovation. When we started outside of the cathedral and you looked at the portal Sainte Anne on the right, the far right, on the south, the far right, that actually the tympan on top of that portal was taken from the first Roman church that was in front of the cathedral. So it was always a restoration. And actually, when you read about the story, the first building of Notre Dame, they went through many iterations of budgets. It was a difficult process. And then going through the years, obviously we focused on the main renovation of the 19th century, which we actually thank, and we should always thank Victor Hugo. And sometimes you tend to forget about how important Victor Hugo, with The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was to saving Notre Dame. Because when he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1831 is when it came out, he was 29 years old or 30 years old, and that was an immediate success. And it was really about protecting and preserving the legacy, this beautiful legacy. And that actually spurred a contest to save, for architects to save Notre Dame.
Right.
And so actually in 1844, so just 13 years later, is when the restoration by Eugène Viollet-le-Duc started. And that took about 20 years. And
so essentially, Victor Hugo put it it was already on the map, obviously, but he put it back into the spotlight. Everyone's talking about it. The tourists are coming there and they say, okay, we need to fix this up a little bit. Is that kind of how it happened?
Well, it was he who, with another character, important one, Mérimée, who wanted to re-energize what does these monuments, what do they mean to French people? And they put that back, and obviously Victor Hugo with his book, people reading his book felt, well, we need to, it was sort of a pledge to save what almost was destructed. Before the Victor Hugo book, there were discussions of, well, it's so destroyed by the revolutionaries, before that the Protestants. I mean, there are just so many times when Notre Dame had been destroyed, and then also by erosion, that it was a pledge to keep this monument and to save it. But there were discussions at that time to maybe destroy it.
Which is the same thing that happened to Carcassonne, incidentally. They were going to destroy it because it had been so ruined, and then Eugène Viollet-le-Duc stepped in again. But that's another story. I want to talk about, is the plan now that you're going to continue doing your tours about restoration now that there's going to be new restoration going on?
Well, we'd like to, in the same way we've been contributing our work to the life of Notre Dame with the association, the music association, we want to continue that work. So in whatever we do, this 21st century chapter of Notre Dame is a major chapter and will be remembered in history many hundreds of years later from our time as an important challenge in the history of Notre Dame. So I think there's a lot to say, and we would definitely want to contribute to the way I would call it the rebirth of Our Lady. Notre Dame is Our Lady. So we are thinking right now. We're in the midst of with Quentin, obviously, our storyteller, to decide what would be this journey on which we would like to invite guests to follow us, and to tell the story of Notre Dame, also including what was saved. I mean, luckily, when I was telling you what I was thinking of, hopefully most of the jewels and what we've witnessed inside is saved, and to our relief and to our collective relief, the big organ is saved.
Yes, right. It was saved or undamaged, or
it's undamaged.
Right.
So it's undamaged. It needs to be cleaned. Obviously, the more than 7,000 pipes need to be cleaned.
Yeah.
But it's unhurt.
That's incredible. Because that's what I thought about. Because it's made of wood as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The rose windows. I think the three major rose windows where the stained glasses are from the medieval times. Those are saved.
Wow.
I don't have the details yet of whether the lead between the glasses is in good shape or not. It probably might need to be reinforced, but it did not fall, and it's not broken. We mentioned the crown of thorns that was immediately put away and saved.
I bet someone ran in and grabbed that straight away.
They did. The accounts that you can read is that they, in the whole commotion, they couldn't find the keys to that safe where the crown of thorns is.
Yeah.
So just the fire team, they just banged.
Jeez.
And they opened it up and they put it. I think it's in the city hall now, but it's safely stored. So there are many stories. I mean, there's this amazing story of on top of the spire was this rooster.
Yes.
You heard about this story.
I heard about this.
And the rooster, when the spire fell to the bottom of the church. And so it's actually intact. And in that rooster are relics. I don't know how the relics are, if they're saved, but at least that rooster is there. And so you can imagine how important that is and symbolic it is. The rooster on top of the spire is saved.
Yeah, and they didn't find it straight away either. I think it was like 2 days before they found it, right? Yeah.
The bells, I mean, you could imagine, I talked about how we were all frightened collectively of the fire, destroying the towers, and obviously destroying the towers means melting the bells.
Right.
And so the bells are intact. So I think I think this is the hope. And I actually thought what the words of our president, Macron, that same evening, about the words that he had of rebuilding immediately. He said, we're going to rebuild, we're going to restore, we're going to moving forward. I think that's so important for the healing process of France, of French people, of Parisians.
And he said 5 years, right?
And 5 years. And, I think it's great. Why not? And so, yes, specialists might say, oh, that's crazy, it's insane, it's not going to be possible, unheard of, whatever words they'll use. I'm like, let's try it. And I think that's sometimes where I feel, I'm half American, half French, so the half American in me is like, yeah, you need that sort of go forward spirit.
Yep.
Let's do it. And we'll make it happen. So, but that
what does the French half of you say?
Well, the other French would understand you at these moments you have to intellectualize a bit and you have to think it through, and or what you've heard of would be it's not for the president to sort of set the pace of the restoration of Notre Dame, but I think it's and also it's wonderful to hear about the over 1 billion euros.
Sure.
And so yes, also you can be critical of how quickly.
Well, that was a controversial thing for a lot of people. A lot of people were saying that the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest movement, has been protesting for I don't even know how long now, like 25 weeks or something, and there haven't been, no one's given any money to their cause. This is what some people are saying. And then they say when the Notre Dame burns down, it gets €1 billion in 2 seconds. And people were suggesting that the priorities were maybe mixed up. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they're really two separate topics, and you cannot mix them, and especially not in the aftermath of such a tragedy. So I think it's sort of a shortcut to say that. You can understand, but it's completely separate. And I think I would say putting yourself in the shoes of the president, who, by the way, I don't know if obviously you followed, but for your listeners, that same night, right, on Monday the 15th of April, at I think it was 8 p.m., the announcement of Macron. It was sort of an answer to all the protests of the Yellow Vests. It was the official answer after 2 months of national debate, where there were meetings organized in all of France, sort of to hear the concerns and dolences of the French, mainly the Yellow Vests, the conclusions and the new measures of the government were being announced by Macron that same evening. So he, on the spot, he decided, I'm canceling that, obviously.
That's
and
right.
and he went on. And I think the words he found were, again, I'm repeating myself, but are definitely helping to heal.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the amount, the over 1 billion now, over 1 billion euros. And before, putting this in perspective, before the fire, the team at Notre Dame, they were trying to raise, and it was tough.
That's right.
For 2 years,
Right.
I mean, or more, they were trying to raise 150 million euros
For restoration.
to restore. So the spire, they had found the funding for the spire, and the scaffolding had just been completed, right? Just last week.
Yep.
A few months of installing 500 tons of scaffolding, which luckily did not fall, did not collapse. I mean, that was also, when you're outside and you're watching the scene, if that collapses, it's going to hurt, do huge damage. So the church is looking for was expecting or searching 150 million. The government was putting half if the church would find half.
Yep.
So there was a sort of special agreement there. And it was tough. So when you put that in perspective, that was the amount needed to restore and preserve and protect what was Notre Dame and how already devastated it was from the outside. Many of the gargoyles, the chimeras, especially the south wall, the south side.
Yep.
Was really damaged, and you can see that when we went in. I don't know if you remember, Oliver. You can see it just from the outside. So you can see some of that damage on the side of the cathedral, not necessarily from the facade, which had been restored.
I remember. You can get it. Yeah, we saw it. It might even be in my video. I've got a question that you sort of made me think about it before, when you said, when you were referring to that you're half American and half French. I'm intrigued on your thoughts on the coverage of Notre Dame burning. If you can compare the French coverage, and I know you've got some what is it called? Hors série?
Hors série, yeah.
Hors
These are
série.
special editions that were put out by all the major French media.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pictures of those and put them on my Instagram channel later.
Sure.
In fact, I'll do it today because we're recording this on the day that it's going out. But I want you to compare your thoughts on the French coverage and the American coverage of Notre Dame burning, and if you think anyone went over the top, or if you think there was anything that was a bit of a miss.
Well, and also to introduce some of the coverage, you have the major dailies that produced hors-série, which are special editions, like Le Figaro. The news magazines like Le Point and L'Express did the special editions. not special editions, but they offered their coverage, their weekly coverage to obviously to Notre Dame. Paris Match did a special cover.
So when you're saying this, you're literally going through. You've got about 10 sort of glossy magazines
Yeah.
where every single page is about. What's inside of it? It's more than just.
Well, inside is it's the history. It's what has been saved. It's about the devastation and about the fire. It's maybe to answer your question, to try and answering your question. The coverage in France has been mostly about celebrating this monument, this iconic monument, and connecting that monument with helping understanding what's its past, understanding its future, or what its present was. So I personally think all of these media did a wonderful work, of covering Notre Dame with many illustrations, photos, which I personally had never seen before. So this is very valuable research and, in some cases, investigative work that has been done to cover the event. I'll speak to the international coverage, which I'll speak maybe to the New York Times, which is dear to my heart. I've worked for the New York Times for many years, so I follow that media more than others. But I would tend to say maybe from the outside, it was obviously understanding the connection of Notre Dame to France, but also there's this world communion or connection with everyone. But maybe the difference would be a bit more on the investigative work was more on the reasons why. Maybe which there is actually an investigation that's going to be started.
Right.
That has started on the reasons why, if it's truly accidental, and which I believe it is, and how did it start? How can this happen? And obviously, the learning is, if you understand how this happens, you are better equipped to protect it in the future and others. But maybe I'll leave it to that as far as the. But I was very touched by many of the reading I did in France, and again by the coverage, also the international coverage that I've been also reading.
What do you think about, you're a fan of Notre Dame, I think we can quite safely say. What do you think of this idea of opening up the restoration to as a competition? Are you worried that something might come that might not be to your taste?
So I've become a fan. I love Notre Dame for what it represented. In the few months that I've been able to discover, it's a bit like a friend. You get into, know them by sight, and you pass in front of them every day, and you see them from afar. And in the past few months, I've been really engaging into this special dialogue, even I would say spiritual dialogue, and many of you will understand with Notre Dame. And yes, I've become a fan because there's no way you cannot become a fan of Notre Dame when you get to know her so closely. And I think that's a very special connection or communication that I was able to, and I'm thankful for that. To your question about the contest, I think Notre Dame went through a contest in the 19th century. Viollet-le-Duc won it with one of his partner architects. There were two architects. They won it because they presented the most ambitious, the most complete, comprehensive restoration project that anyone could present. I mean, that was, I think, his life in a way. He spent from the age of 30 when he won the contest and he started the restorations, Viollet-le-Duc, to the age of 50. So this is a big part of his life to Notre Dame. So he, and we can talk about his ego and architect's ego.
Sure, yeah.
There were caricatures which you might have seen. Maybe that could be one of the pictures you show as well. There's a few of that. There's a caricature where you see his big head because in France you say quand j'ai le melon. Your head is when you have big ego.
What do they say? Congé le
Quand j'ai le
melon.
melon. Melon means melon. When you have the melon, that means you're full of yourself.
And what does congé mean?
No, I'm sorry. It's just an expression saying when you have the melon.
Okay.
When someone has the melon.
Congé le melon.
So someone who has the melon
Yeah.
is someone who's got this big head and who's like, super ego. And so the caricatures at the time of Viollet-le-Duc, you see he's got this huge head and he's holding Notre Dame in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've discovered through our journey where he represented himself on the facade.
That's
he represented himself
In a
on the
statue
spire, on the
That's
top,
right.
and then there's a third on one of the windows, the glass windows. So, but be it. I think it's wonderful. So obviously now, bringing 200 years later, you've got this new huge restoration project. Architects are obviously, if you're an architect, a well-known architect, and you're asked, and you can answer this contest, you're going to do it. I mean, the whole controversy is, well, should the spire be exactly the one? I personally think it should not. I think Notre Dame is a story of constant reinvention.
Sure.
And so I trust in the same way, history will repeat itself. Viollet-le-Duc was very controversial when he did the spire. The new spire will surely be controversial. I have no doubt about it. Like the Pyramid of the Louvre was controversial.
Right.
Like the Centre Pompidou was controversial. So
Eiffel Tower.
the Eiffel Tower.
Yep.
So, and that is fine. And that's, I think, it's important because that is part of, I would say, human nature. The process of human nature is, well, there's a time when it's difficult to accept, but then, actually, yes, living it with it, it's actually not bad. It's nice. You can start seeing the beauty in it. So I tend to trust this new 21st century renovation.
As long as it doesn't, like sometimes they rename a football team or a football stadium after a brand. You don't want it to be like the Reebok Notre Dame with a big Reebok on the roof. You know what I mean? You don't want that.
No, that would be the...
As long as there's some kind of artistic integrity. I don't know why I chose Reebok. If anyone's going to get it, it's not going to be Reebok probably. But you know what I mean? I saw one picture of a glass.
Well, they don't need Reebok. They have enough, and they'll have enough donors.
That's true. They don't. But I saw some pictures of a potential glass. Everything made of glass, see-through. So the whole ceiling and roof will be which could be amazing.
I mean, technology, that's where 21st century technology should be part of this new phase of Notre Dame. This is definitely, why? So yes, you want to preserve some of the techniques, and you need to preserve some of the techniques they call the compagnons du devoir. Those are the companions who have the artisans. So yes, they're going to bring this know-how, this expertise, which is so precious to rebuilding Notre Dame, parts of Notre Dame, but in some places, like Viollet-le-Duc did it, in some areas, he put his touch. He reinvented what he thought was the Gothic, the medieval. He reinterpreted it. But he knew so much about Gothic architecture that what he did was truly wonderful.
When do you think they're going to let people in again, full stop? I mean, if it's going to take 5 years, let's say minimum, for it to be renovated. Can we say renovated? I know restored is probably the correct word. So 5 years for that, says Macron. But if the north and south towers are all right, do you think people will be able to get in there again within the next couple of years?
So about the word, this is quite interesting. Macron went on national TV and he said rebuild, reconstruire. That's the words that he used. And so then, there were a lot of discussions just on the word, right? It's interesting, just on one word. Oh, is it really a reconstruction? I agree with you. It's a reconstruction, it's a renovation, it's a restoration. It's sort of a rebirth. That's why I like the sort of rebirth.
Yeah, I like it.
Word.
Well, especially because it's Easter Monday today.
Yes. But to the question of when are we going to be able, Do you have a crystal ball somewhere here? I don't know. I can see some chocolates here with a ball with chocolates. But no,
I hadn't noticed them. Thanks for pointing those out.
no, I don't know. I hope as soon as, the security, I think it really will depend on security is going to be at the forefront of of everyone's concern. Is when can you enter the building in a very secure way? I hope it's going to be earlier than when the rebirth is completed. And it might be the case, because it'd be wonderful to see some of the reconstruction, the renovation, the restoration happening around you. There are discussions of doing, you might have heard of this, of doing a model in wood, a full model in wood of Notre Dame on the square, the main square.
I hadn't heard that. That sounds good.
So that's, I think, a nice way for visitors from around the world, including Parisians, to gain a better view and context of what it's going to take.
Well, they have a lot of those for blind people outside big buildings around the world.
In bronze or in
yeah. So they should have one anyway.
They should, yes. That you can touch. Hopefully, we can touch it.
Yeah. Philippe, one thing I've noticed about you and Macron and other people is that you've got quite a positive attitude towards a tragedy that has left a lot of people feeling very upset. Is that a French thing? Where's the positivity come from?
Well, I think it's a universal thing, or value, whether it's Notre Dame's tragedy or any tragedy in life, you have to sort of cherish what has been saved, what's left, the people around you, and start already focusing on building the future and really using that legacy that people, places, landmarks provided and left to you, and take that strength to rebuild something. I mean, the new journey that we would like to present around Notre Dame, we want to talk about the rooster, the bells that were saved, the crown of thorns, the tunique of Saint Louis, the rose windows. I mean, all those beautiful items, and including, and this is the amazing story, the apostles. And the story of the apostles, where a few days before April 15th, and these are the 12 apostles at the top of the spire, and you'll see beautiful pictures if you haven't seen them before from close. So there are 12 apostles looking towards the horizon. One of them is looking towards the spire, and we're talking about the ego of Viollet-le-Duc.
Right.
It's Viollet-le-Duc looking at his spire.
Checking out his work.
So, and he was actually he represented himself in St. Thomas, the patron of the architects. And so those 12 apostles were taken off the spire a few days before. It was actually, you see pictures of that whole event. It was a big event in Paris because it was officially the end of the scaffolding being installed, the beginning of the huge new restoration happening. So those are preserved, those are saved. So to the question of the new spire, I actually hope, contemporary or not or less, that the new design of the spire, I'm hoping, I'm sure they will integrate those apostles. I mean, how can't they?
You're right. I think
how can't they include the apostles? So those are stories that we want to convey to our guests, our future guests, joining us on this new journey about this incredible new chapter. Incredible as it may be, as it may sound, turning this into an opportunity to give a rebirth to Our Lady.
Okay, and we should, similar to what your first interview was like, Philippe, I'll give you a chance to talk about the other stuff that you do, because it's not just Notre Dame. And when you came in a week ago, we talked a lot about, there's a lot of stuff we talked about that's just faded into the ether now. But you've got News Versailles coming up. Yes,
obviously, I'm really here to talk about Notre Dame, and thanks for this opportunity, Oliver. What we're trying to achieve in the work we're doing is cover landmarks, iconic landmarks like Notre Dame and Versailles. We have been through this small year of development. We've been developing other journeys that are more, off the beaten track, small museums you haven't heard of, a little workshop, but still they make flowers for Chanel. So we're trying to really uncover the Paris that maybe you think you know, but we're going to give you this opportunity to know it even better in a more intimate way and meet people who make these places, bring these places to life. So just a short comment on Versailles. We're very excited. Obviously, it's launching officially on May 10th. And we've been working on Versailles for over a year with actually the team and the president of the Château de Versailles, Catherine Pégard. And what's interesting is when I met with Mrs. Pégard, she had been a journalist before being the president of the Château de Versailles. She worked for Le Point, actually one of the magazines I have here, a weekly news magazine. Then she was advisor to one of our presidents, Sarkozy.
Wow.
And she was put in the position of president by Hollande, and then renewed by Hollande before Macron came. So that role of president of Versailles is quite important.
She's got quite the LinkedIn page, I imagine. Wow.
Oh, yes. And so, but because she has this journalistic background, when I introduced what we're doing with Secret Journeys, which what we're about is bringing journalism, narrative journalism into and storytelling into travel, into the world of travel, she immediately understood what we wanted to do. Stories. And if I may share an anecdote,
please.
She actually gave me, and I thanked her for giving me this anecdote. She said, "Philippe, I understand what you're trying to do with Secret Journeys. I was at an auction with all the curators, and some of these curators were focused on many of the objects that we already have. And there was just one object that had so many stories behind it, which no one saw, which I saw with this journalistic view, all the stories. And that object was the pen, the feather pen, that signed the Versailles Treaty. And so that pen, that feather, she said, we need to buy it. They found a donor, which was the Galerie Lafayette, to buy it. And so that's what we're trying to bring to travel, and to maybe to end on Versailles. There are three major moments in Versailles. The first one, we have a journalist, former New York Times author, who's now a playwright and still author, contextualizing the visit of the women of Versailles, the women being the queens, but also the mistresses. And so that moment of contextualization is in the bus going to Versailles.
Right.
The second moment is you're with a professional conference guide of Versailles, visiting the apartments of Comtesse du Barry and Marquise de Pompadour. So you need a special guard to open the doors for you, and so that's about an hour and a half. And then you end in this amazing, still inside the cathedral. The castle. You end at Ducasse, which is the restaurant of Ducasse, the chef Ducasse,
right,
for a glass of champagne, and we continue with the storytelling with Alan writing, and with someone from the team of Ducasse telling you about the dinners of exception that Ducasse created in Versailles every night. So that's launching soon, and
pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm going to be doing that one as well, I think, but not May 10th. Sometime
May 22nd.
That's right. Exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So for all you guys at home that are interested in these kind of secret journeys around Paris, or indeed keeping your eyes on what Philippe and his team comes up with for Notre Dame, you want to go to secretjourneys.travel. Am I right?
Yes.
Secretjourneys.travel. But thanks for coming in to the studio again, Philippe, and for sharing your knowledge with me. It was a great pleasure.
It was a pleasure as well. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. And everybody, I'm going to play a little bit of music, but hang around for more from French Today and a little bit of reader emails. Thanks, Philippe.
Merci.
So there you have it, a somber edition of the Earful Tower, but necessary. I think that we focused on that. Quite, chilling really that he and I did a very similar interview to this just hours before the Notre Dame burned down. But yeah, there you go. I figure I'll get into a little bit of French Today in a second. First, a bit of Gmail, which is essentially email, but sent to me, Oliver G. I call it Gmail. It's a new thing. I'm going to go with it. But I thought this isn't so much an email, but it just kind of made me laugh. This guy, John, if you're listening, the most Australian email I've ever got. I'm going to read bits of it right now. Big cat, he says, big cat. Greetings from the motherland. That's how I knew he was Australian. My wife and I and our 2 boys are heading to Paris in July, and I've stumbled across your podcast. Fantastic. I'm going to do your accent, Johnny. I've stumbled across your podcast. Fantastic little pod, by the way. I've been smashing out the back catalogue to catch up on everything, and I've listened to a bunch of your guests who've written books about Paris. I wanted to pick your brain and get your top 3 essentials in preparation for the trip. I checked, he's referring to my top 3 books about Paris. Anyway, the email went on, but I suggested to Johnny that he join the book club, which is partly why I'm reading out this email, because I think you guys should all join the book club. Free to join. A suggested Patreon donation of $5 a month if you think it's worth chipping in for. This month's book is Paris to the Moon by Adam Gopnik, which, the month's almost over, so probably better that you get in for the next month's book, which I can reveal right now is going to be Murder in the Marais by Cara Black. She's going to be, I'm going to do a video with her. She's in Paris. She's got a new book coming up, but we discussed it. We thought we'd do her first ever book, detective, murder, mystery. Get your teeth into it, everybody. Anyway, I gave Johnny a few books to get him going. And you know what he said? He said, ding, 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 all aboard the Patreon Express. 1 ticket for John Day, locked and loaded. So there you go. New Patreon supporter. Thanks for joining, John. And look forward to seeing you on those message boards, especially all the rest of you as well. Now, listen, French Today, I said at the very start of the episode that I've been very sick all week. I've been in bed. I'm going to be totally honest with everybody here, is I haven't been doing my French lesson homework at all. I haven't done anything. Haven't really even been responding to my own emails. So I'm not going to tell you the things that I've learned, but I just give you a bit of an overview of how everything's going. And I want to say there's been a lot of feedback from people saying they really like this French Today sort of end of the episode bit where I'm talking about what I've learned. A lot of people have been saying, I'm planning to buy the audiobooks. Do me a favor, go and buy the audiobooks, because then they'll continue being a sponsor of this show, which is very helpful to me. So if you want to support this show, why not buy an audiobook over on FrenchToday.com. But if you add FrenchToday.com/earful4, 4 being for the month of April, or do 5 or 6 for the next 2 months, which is how long this partnership is going to be running for, add that, you'll get a further 10% off anything that you buy from their audiobook package. So what is it? If you've never listened to the Earful Tower before, you've probably never heard me talking about French Today. It's audiobooks. It's a lot more than just repeating, although that's a large part of it. There's more to it. There's the study guides that go with it. You listen to it, and then Camille, the woman behind it, she purposely adds bits in that are relevant, that are difficult, that are at your level, whether you're just beginning or you're just trying to perfect your French. And you finish going through the text. At the end, they've got the fun little bits there for you to repeat, and to learn. And then if you're anything like me, you'll put them in your vocabulary and impress your French friends or your French teacher. So there's something for you. FrenchToday.com/earful4. Get that extra 10% off. Look, the next episode is going to be from Camille. We're going to be talking a lot more about French language and language learning, but this is more of a call out for all you guys who have been thinking about doing it or have told me that you're going to do it. Now's the time to buy a French Today audiobook. Support them, you're supporting the show. It's pretty much that simple. So that's it for me. I'm going to have some honey tea or some lemon tea or something. Thanks for all your warm wishes, everybody, and all your support. I'll be talking to you again on Monday as usual. Au revoir.
I don't really know where we are. I just wanna look at the stars.